It's Rob and Sandra from My Wife the Dietitian, and this is Nutrition Nuggets.
Ooh, and we're going to be talking about the little tiny grain nuggets of brown rice versus white rice.
Oh, this is the age-old question, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, I think people wonder, should I buy some brown rice for the family or white? And, I've heard brown rice is better because it's got more fiber.
'Cause
It's
it's
a whole
brown,
grain.
right?
Yeah, and it's a whole grain, right? But I think a lot of people also eat white rice because it's a pretty standard side dish for so many things, like sushi and grain bowls. And, it's just one of those foods that everyone eats it.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. It is that, well, I said it, the age-old question, but it is. I think people are confused because brown is always healthier, typically, when it comes to food. And white is like, oh, there's nothing in it. You want the brown version. So
yeah. And also, I think a lot of people that are on gluten-free diets, they're choosing rice products because there's no gluten in it. So it's an easy substitution. So people might be having a lot of rice, whereas they maybe didn't normally have a lot of rice and maybe in the past have had more variety with their grains. So that's an issue too to discuss.
all right. So I'm guessing that you're going to tell us that, the whole purpose of this episode is to just sort of dispel the myth of the brown rice and maybe clear the air as to sort of the health benefits of each.
Yeah, I want to cover the nutrition part of things and then concerns with brown rice and also some takeaway messages for people just to use rice in their cooking.
Perfect. I've got some tips too.
That's great. We have both rices, don't we? We have white and brown in our pantry.
Yeah, sometimes we'll cook them together.
I don't remember that.
No, that's how I cook.
You're so funny, as if.
Well, leftovers more. It's like, oh, there's some of this and some of that. Oh, they're good. They're all friends, right? They all came from the same place. So we'll just put them in the pot together and it'll be part of my lunch.
That's awesome. Actually, the leftover, talking about leftovers, having rice, especially the white rice or brown rice, in the fridge the next day, that's actually a better way to eat rice in terms of your glycemic index response.
That was actually going to be one of my tips. Not what you just said, but when I cook rice or when I cook pasta, actually when I cook a lot of things, I'll make tons of it because then you do have those leftovers. And we've mentioned this before about, cooking enough to have stuff for making soup or adding to your salad or making another meal or putting it in a wrap or whatever. It's and rice is one of those things. Like, don't just make a cup of rice. All the effort it takes to boil the water and measure everything out, you might as well make 4 cups of rice or the entire bag and then just store it in your fridge and it's ready to go.
I guess it depends on how big the bag is, though.
Well, yeah.
Sometimes you get those gigantic, restaurant size bags. That'd be a lot of rice, Rob.
That would be a lot of rice. No, I'm just figuring the whatever size they are, that size of a football, that kind of bag size.
That's still a lot of rice to me.
All right. Just make more than you would feed yourself for the meal. That's my point.
If you like leftovers, and definitely I do.
I like leftovers.
Well, they make a lot of sense, I think, for a lot of people.
Yes, for sure. All right. So I have a question for you.
What's that?
And just a good place to start, maybe. What's the difference? With white rice and brown rice, are they kind of the same thing? They start as the same, from the same place, and one is modified more or less, or do you know what I'm trying to
say? Yeah. So brown rice it's similar to brown bread. You've got the grain and you've got the endosperm and the germ and the bran on the outside.
Right.
So the brown rice, just like brown bread or whole grain bread, still has the bran. So that's why it has more fiber.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that's the biggest difference. So because the brown rice has the bran, it has more fiber. It also has a higher level of folic acid, of iron, magnesium, and zinc. White rice is more refined, so it's more processed. So because of that, it has a higher glycemic index, meaning it will spike your blood sugar more rapidly than the brown rice because it takes more time for the digestion to break down that brown rice. So white rice you can potentially overeat it, have too much of it because it's so, you can eat a lot of it and you don't feel full.
Yeah, I understand that. So white rice basically is brown rice. It's been processed. Is that kind of the bottom line?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of different types of rice, though.
Oh, for sure. I was just in my head, I just kind of wanted to understand the difference on a organic level, I guess.
Right. Yes. And actually, one of the takeaway messages we're going to talk about is variety is a spice of life. So it's really good to have different variety and try different types of rice and different types of grains. But the basmati is in Hindi, it means full of aroma or fragrant, or the queen of perfumed rice.
That's the long one, right? Basmati, I think. Or is that jasmine rice?
No, jasmine's a very short grain rice. Basmati actually has a lower glycemic index, so it doesn't spike the blood sugar as quickly as the jasmine. And yeah, they're all different types, right? And then the brown rice is heavier, chewier. Some people don't like that texture. Like it's very dense.
It's not fluffy.
No.
I like fluff. I like basmati. That's my favorite, I'm pretty sure. And I like the texture of it. I like the fluffiness of it. And you're right, brown rice doesn't have those things. So if that's what you're looking for, then yeah.
Yeah, and we put coconut milk, like a can of coconut milk, in the rice cooker when we're making basmati. And it just, the whole kitchen smells so good.
It
and
totally
it just
does.
makes it so creamy and sweet tasting.
Mm-hmm.
So good. Yeah. And wild rice, that's a really good thing. All these are types of grasses and grains.
You got to keep your eye on those ones, though.
Yeah, they're wild.
When you're cooking them. Yeah.
But that's a way to get a bit more protein, because rice kind of is a very low nutritionally dense grain. Like out of all the grains you can eat, it doesn't have a ton of nutrition. It doesn't have a lot of protein. But the wild rices increases that protein and increases the folic acid, and the omega-3 to 6 ratio is also better. So there's one issue, though, with the brown rice. So in our food supply, there's two big sources of arsenic, and that's brown rice is a big source, and drinking water. And so what happens is if you're having a lot of brown rice, like if that's your main food most days, you're probably getting too much of that inorganic arsenic, which is, what is it? The poison of kings and the king of poisons. Do you remember in the Shakespearean era? And
oh yeah, way back. I remember that Shakespearean era. It's like it was
seen
yesterday.
Movies and where they had arsenic to their drink at a meal, like, and you know they slip it in to off their enemy into their mead or their grog. I guess mead's like a honey.
It's like a wine, right?
A fermented honey to make wine, and then the grog is like a rum. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so that, I mean, arsenic was a way to kill their political rivals or enemies, and you don't get that much when you're having brown rice, but it is a heavy metal that is a concern in especially young people, like kids that have a smaller body mass. They're still growing. It is a concern, just like mercury and tuna. We've talked about that in another episode.
Yeah.
And that was nutrition nuggets.
I've lost track now. There's so many. We'll add it to the show notes once we figure it out.
Yeah. So just to be aware that brown rice has a higher level of arsenic than other foods. So that's a concern for people, that, especially if that's your main grain, like if that's what you're eating all the time.
Yeah, like you were saying, if you're gluten-free and you're eating a lot more rice and you're choosing brown rice because you think it's more healthy, and I suppose it does have more nutrients in it than white rice, but it also has that arsenic. So that's something to keep in mind. And I always think, like, if you're making something with rice, you're not just going to eat a bowl of rice. Typically, you're going to make some vegetables and some other things to go with it. So you're getting your nutrients from those food items as well. So if you're using white rice, then you can sacrifice the nutrients that you would have gotten from the brown rice and add them in.
Absolutely. That's actually one of the takeaway messages is adding the vegetables, adding legumes, fruits, nuts, seeds, any of those things into your rice dish. Like if you have a meal or a plate or a bowl with rice, then have that like a half cup or just like a serving of rice, not like the whole, 3 cups of rice as your as your meal.
Right, right. The rice is kind of like the condiment with the vegetables and whatever you've made in your stir fry.
Yeah. Do you know why I didn't mention why the arsenic is happening? It's through different human activities like farming or tanning, coal mining, coal burning.
Oh, so it's coming like through the soil.
Exactly.
And it's been the soil has ingested it from mankind's operations.
And that's why the water too can have some arsenic in it too.
Oh.
So there's different places in the world that have their rice has less arsenic, and that's actually California has a lower level of arsenic in their rice, and India and Pakistan too.
Oh, nice. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and it's not a huge difference with the fiber in terms of white rice and brown rice. There's not a huge difference in a serving in terms of how much fiber. There's more fiber definitely in the brown rice, and it's definitely something you can continue to include it with a variety of other grains in your overall diet. But I wouldn't rely on brown rice as your main staple for rice.
Right.
I would mix it up and have sometimes basmati, sometimes white, sometimes brown. Definitely wild rices, and then also other ones like quinoa and barley and couscous. And
yeah, those are good too.
Yeah, so using other types of grains is good too, and variety is the spice of life, right?
It totally is. You were saying something about washing the rice too, right? That helps if you are using brown rice, or is that with any rice?
Yeah, with any rice, definitely, and legumes and everything, any kind of grain that you're using. If you wash it, that helps to reduce some of the arsenic and some of the dirt and other things. So like lentils, the same thing, or any of the beans that are dried. Mm-hmm. But with the rice, if you rinse the brown rice before you cook it, that will reduce the level of arsenic in it by 1/3. And then if you cook it like you would pasta, so you cook it the ratio of water, like a lot more water than rice. So like 1 cup of rice to 6 cups of water, like in a whole pot of water.
Right.
That will help also reduce the level of arsenic, which is really important if you're cooking brown rice and there's kids in the family and you're using that rice for a lot of different people, just to reduce that heavy metal load.
Yeah.
Part of the issue is, I know there's been a trend, and I think we're going to do another episode on this about the, gluten and gluten-free diets. So if you don't have celiac disease or if you don't have a gluten intolerance, you could probably include some gluten-containing foods without a problem. And I think rice has been so relied on in the last few years for people that are on gluten-free. And the thing is too, you can end up eating a lot of ultra processed foods if you're using gluten-free products, and then they're highly processed. You're getting a lot of other items like fillers and flavorings and coloring and all these other chemicals in the food.
Yeah,
so that's something just to be aware of too. So, people that are kind of taking away like whole foods to buy the ultra processed gluten-free products, it's not really doing your health service.
Yeah, totally. And you were mentioning something about brown rice syrup.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When we were talking about this earlier, just the fact that brown rice syrup is in a lot of health foods. So a lot of foods that like protein bars or even baby cereals and baby formula, they sweeten them with brown rice syrup. And the level of arsenic in the brown rice is pretty high. And then there's a lot of a higher than normal level of arsenic in the brown rice syrup foods. Like
it's concentrated more in the syrup.
Yeah.
And then they're adding that to the food.
Yeah.
Right. I see.
Yeah. To sweeten it, because it's kind of a, more of a natural sweetener, but it's got its downsides too.
It's got arsenic in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like small amounts. I mean, that's the thing. If it's like a budget, like if you are looking through your cupboard and looking at the labels, and if you see brown rice syrup on a lot of your foods that you're eating, that's a red flag that, okay, maybe I'm consuming too much of these because I'm getting too much arsenic.
Yeah, for sure.
Because arsenic's not on the label.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they don't call it arsenic in big letters.
Just like mercury wouldn't be on the label in, those fish that have more of that heavy metal.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
So it's just to be aware of those things and know that this is a good way for people to learn this information.
Yeah, because I didn't know that stuff. I'd sort of heard about the brown rice, but I probably forgot. So it's a good reminder for those people who sort of have heard that or were unsure. Or yeah, and the brown rice syrup, I had never heard of that before. So that's another good one.
Yeah.
So it's a bit misleading too when you think that, oh, I'm buying this health food or this baby food even, and it's got high levels of arsenic in it. So those are really good points.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not high levels, but they're levels that are concerning, that if you're eating a lot of products with these, then the level could accumulate.
Sure. Well, baby food, I mean, you eat that 3 times a day. Well, I don't eat it, but babies, I mean, for part of their infancy, they're eating a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I think the FDA in 2020 made a statement, and that was a cause for concern, just that companies had to watch the level of brown rice syrup and in the baby food and the baby formula.
Yeah, good to know.
Yeah, so the bottom line, if you do have rice in your diet a lot, maybe try a variety. Maybe have some white, some brown, some quinoa, couscous, wild rices, try other grains, and don't always just stick to the same type of rice that you always buy. And definitely variety, as I mentioned, like just change it up and have different ones.
Yeah, totally.
And when you are cooking it, wash it first. So wash your rice. And that's why, if we go back a little bit, rewind, when we're talking about the gluten-free products that you buy, like rice crackers or rice cakes is a good example. Because when I learned about this arsenic, I remember saying to the kids, you can't really rinse the rice cakes, or you can't rinse them. Like you can rinse your rice before you eat it.
True.
So you're reducing that arsenic load. But if you have something like a product, you can't really rinse your crackers.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So yeah. So washing your rice before, so maybe with a colander or like a little sieve or something, just put the amount in and run it under the water to rinse it off, and then cook it like it's pasta. That's the third thing, is just have a huge volume of water compared to the amount of rice. So a cup of rice to 6 cups of water is a good kind of rule of thumb.
A lot of times the instructions will say you have like a cup of water and a cup of rice, and then it just absorbs all the water and then you're done, right? So are you saying to use more water, and then when it's done, you empty off the excess water?
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Exactly. And actually, I think I mentioned at the very start that the leftover rice, so if it's been in the fridge, it's like it's already been cooked, and then the next day when you use it, it actually has a lower glycemic index because it's got a more resistant starch. It's changed in the fridge with the cooling process. And actually that's better. So it's better to use your rice as a leftover. It's how it gets all like gelatinous.
Congealed?
Yeah, like that's the starch, and that actually is digested more slowly when you eat it. So when you drain off the water after you're done with your cooking the rice, and then you eat your meal, and then you put the leftover rice in the fridge and have some for the next day, it's not going to be watery anymore.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's a bit more firm.
Yeah, and it's just got that resistant starch. Okay, the fifth thing we're number 4 takeaway is, as you mentioned, Rob, a variety on your plate or in your rice bowl or grain bowl. You're going to have other vegetables, maybe some legumes like beans, maybe some seeds and nuts, and fruit is another one. So there's different ways to add fiber into your meal, and you're going to use whole foods that help round out that rice dish.
Yeah, for sure. Now we're at number 5.
Right. And number 5 is just portion. So I think that's a big thing with a lot of the grains is people tend to eat a high number of grains through the day because of the amount, like the serving size they're having. And rice is one that's easy to have way too much, especially if you go to like a Chinese buffet or takeout or something, when you have like the meal is like mostly rice and then there's a little bit of vegetable, maybe a tiny bit of condiment of meat or something.
That's what they want. They want you to like load your plate up with rice.
Just fill up with the rice.
They have those like huge bins of rice, and it's like, yeah, take tons of rice and don't eat the more expensive stuff because we're going to lose money on you.
Right. But yeah, that's just a way to make your meal a little bit more nutritionally dense and better balance, is to just have half a cup of rice as your grain or your starch, and then have those vegetables and legumes and nuts and seeds and fruits in there that can balance out that plate.
Yeah, for sure. Yep, good tips.
Great. So next time you go shopping, look at the different grains in the grocery store and see all the variety of rice and all the variety of grains and wild rices, ancient grains. So all of those types of food are a good thing to try for variety in your diet, so that you see what you like, and it just helps with your creativity in the kitchen and figure out how to cook different meals.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'll definitely check out the variety. I've always seen them, but I've never really paid attention. I just kind of grab the same thing all the time. So I'll take your advice. I'll check those out.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, everyone. I hope you learned something new. And you can also check out our social media pages on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. There's new things popping up there all the time. We've also got a website at mywifethedietitian.com, and there's a really good blog on the website that has tons of articles, a lot of them written by dietitians that have joined us on the show. So it's a really valuable source of information there. And if you have any questions about the show, or there's comments or ideas you have for things you'd like us to talk about, feel free to drop us a message. You can email us at mywifethed@gmail.com. So what do we have coming up next week?
Right. We're talking with dietitian Joni Rampolla on how to shop on a budget in the grocery store.
Yeah, she's like a professional. She's got so many tips and really good ideas. So that's a really good practical one to tune into. So that'll be on Monday.
And her office is actually right in the grocery store. This is over in California.
No. She's in the other coast. We're getting confused.
That's right. She was 3 hours ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, that'll be on Monday. So make sure to tune in for that. And don't forget to rate and review the show. That always helps get other people listening and spreading the word. So thanks again for tuning in, and we will talk to everyone next week. Thanks for joining us today on My Wife the Dietitian. If you like what you heard, don't be shy. Leave us a comment or review, and be sure to share our podcast with your friends. If you'd like to hear more, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on our social media pages for updates, episode trailers, and other odds and ends. For more info and links on what we discussed on today's episode, check the show notes. We'll be back next week with another informative and fun-filled episode.